Hey there, grab yourself a coffee and enjoy the story. She kissed him as if it were the first time all over again. William watched Eleanor's eyes crinkle at the corners, the way they always did when she was truly happy. Morning light streamed through their kitchen window, catching the silver in her hair, transforming it into a halo around her beloved face. 52 years together, and still, she could make his heart skip with just a smile. "What are you thinking about, silly?" Eleanor asked, noticing his gaze lingering on her face. William reached across their worn oak table and took her hand in his. Her skin was soft, marked with the gentle topography of age, each line a testament to a life well lived. "Just that I'm the luckiest man in Connecticut," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Their morning ritual remained unchanged for decades. Coffee together as dawn broke over their modest two-story home in the quiet suburb of Millfield. Eleanor with her crossword puzzle, William reading the newspaper. The comfort of routine, the wordless dance of two souls who had grown so intertwined that silence between them felt as natural as breathing. "Don't forget we're meeting Olivia for lunch today," Eleanor reminded him, rising to rinse her coffee cup. "She's bringing those papers from the hospital for her continuing education program." William nodded, watching as his wife moved through their kitchen with the same grace she'd possessed when they'd first met at Hartford University in 1971. She'd been a freshman then, with chestnut hair falling past her shoulders and a laugh that made everyone in the room want to know what the joke was. He'd been a sophomore, too shy to approach her, until fate partnered them for a literature project. "I'm going to water the garden before it gets too hot," Eleanor said, slipping on her gardening clogs by the back door. William watched her go, savoring the comforting predictability of their life together. The garden had been Eleanor's passion since they'd bought this house 47 years ago when Olivia was just a baby. James had come along 3 years later, completing their family. Now their children were grown with lives of their own. Olivia, a dedicated nurse at Hartford Memorial, following her mother's compassionate nature. James, a professor at Berkeley, inheriting his father's love of teaching, but seeking the adventure of a life farther from home. Outside, Eleanor knelt among her beloved roses, her hands working the soil with practiced ease. William watched from the kitchen window, remembering how she'd memorized the Latin name of every plant, how she could recite poetry from memory, how she'd kept track of every birthday, anniversary, and important date without ever needing to write them down. Her mind had always been a marvel to him, sharp, quick, retentive, which was why, when she called the sugar that white stuff during breakfast 3 weeks ago, he'd felt the first tremor of unease. It was nothing, really, a momentary lapse. Everyone had them. But then came the day she'd put her car keys in the refrigerator and spent 2 hours searching for them, growing increasingly frustrated, and the morning she'd asked him who James was when looking at their family photo, just for a split second before recognition flooded back into her eyes, followed by embarrassed laughter. "I'm just tired," she'd insisted when he'd gently suggested a checkup. "I'm 70 years old, Will. I'm allowed to forget things occasionally." But William had seen the flash of fear in her eyes, mirroring his own. Something wasn't right. Eleanor, who had spent 35 years as the most organized librarian at Millfield Public Library, who could recall the plot of every book she'd ever read, was suddenly struggling to remember the name of their next-door neighbor of 20 years. The lunch with Olivia that day started normally enough. They met at Rosemary's Cafe, their daughter already waiting at their usual corner table. At 39, Olivia was the image of Eleanor at that age. The same warm hazel eyes, the same gentle determination in her expression. "Mom, you look beautiful," Olivia said, standing to embrace Eleanor. "Is that a new blouse?" Eleanor glanced down at the pale blue top she wore. "This old thing? I've had it for—" Her voice trailed off, her brow furrowing slightly. "You got it for your birthday last year?" William supplied gently. "From Olivia." "Oh, of course," Eleanor laughed, but William caught the momentary confusion in her eyes. "It's my favorite. Thank you, darling." Lunch progressed pleasantly, with Olivia sharing stories from the hospital, and William discussing the community college classes he still taught part-time since retiring from high school teaching. Eleanor was quieter than usual, but she smiled and nodded at appropriate moments, until Olivia mentioned her brother. "James called last night. He's thinking of coming home for Thanksgiving this year instead of Christmas." Eleanor's fork clattered against her plate. "James?" she asked, her voice suddenly small and uncertain. A heavy silence fell over the table. "Mom," Olivia said carefully. "James, your son, my brother." William watched his wife's face as confusion gave way to recognition, then embarrassment, then something worse, fear. "Of course, James," Eleanor said, forcing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I was just thinking of something else." Olivia's eyes met William's across the table, the concern in them unmistakable. She was a nurse. She recognized the signs. The drive home was quiet. Eleanor staring out the passenger window, her reflection ghostly against the glass. "I think we should see Dr. Martinez," William said finally, his voice gentle but firm. To his surprise, Eleanor nodded without protest. "I think so too," she whispered, and the tremor in her voice broke his heart. The appointment was scheduled for the following week, but 3 days later, Eleanor woke in the middle of the night, panicked and disoriented. "Where am I?" she demanded, her voice sharp with fear. "Who are you?" William turned on the bedside lamp, his heart hammering. "Ellie, it's me. It's Will. You're home, sweetheart. You're safe." For a terrifying moment, she stared at him as if he were a stranger. Then recognition slowly dawned in her eyes, and she collapsed against him, sobbing. "Something's wrong with me, Will," she whispered against his chest. "I'm scared." They moved the appointment up to the next day. Dr. Martinez was thorough, asking Eleanor questions about her symptoms, her family history. She ordered blood tests and brain scans. William held Eleanor's hand through all of it, feeling the slight tremble in her fingers that she tried so hard to control. 2 weeks later, they sat across from Dr. Martinez in her office, the silence heavy as they waited for her to speak. William would later remember every detail of that moment, the way the afternoon light slanted through the blinds, the ticking of the clock on the wall, the framed diplomas behind the doctor's desk, the weight of Eleanor's hand in his. The tests show signs consistent with early-stage Alzheimer's disease, Dr. Martinez said, her voice gentle but direct. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Eleanor's hand tightened around William's, her knuckles white. "There must be a mistake," William heard himself say, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. "Eleanor has always had an incredible memory. She remembers everything." "I understand this is difficult news," Dr. Martinez said, "but the brain scans show some atrophy consistent with Alzheimer's, and the cognitive tests support this diagnosis. There are medications that can help manage symptoms, and I would strongly recommend." But William wasn't listening anymore. He was looking at Eleanor, his Ellie, his partner of more than 5 decades, the keeper of their shared history, the woman who remembered every anniversary, every birthday, every moment of significance in their life together. And she was looking back at him with a terrible clarity in her eyes. "I've known," she whispered, "just for him. Part of me has known for months." The drive home was silent, a different kind of silence than they had ever shared. Not the comfortable quiet of 2 people, so in tune they didn't need words, but the heavy stillness of a shared grief too vast for language. That night, after Eleanor had finally fallen into a restless sleep, William sat at their kitchen table, head in his hands, allowing himself to feel the full weight of their new reality. The diagnosis explained so much: the forgotten names, the misplaced items, the moments of confusion that had been increasing in frequency. Alzheimer's. The word itself felt like a sentence, a thief that would steal Eleanor from him piece by piece, memory by memory. But as dawn broke over their home, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor, William made a decision. He wouldn't let the disease define their remaining time together. He wouldn't surrender to despair. With new purpose, he went to Eleanor's desk in the corner of their living room. From the bottom drawer, he pulled out a leather-bound journal she had bought years ago, but never used. The pages were cream-colored and thick, perfect for what he had in mind. For the next 30 days, he would create a memory book for Eleanor, a tangible record of their life together, something she could hold on to as her own memories began to slip away. He would fill it with photographs, stories, mementos, all the precious moments that made up their shared history. It wouldn't stop the progression of the disease. It wouldn't change the diagnosis, but it would be his declaration of love, his promise that no matter what lay ahead, their story, 52 years in the making, would not be forgotten. As the first light of day spilled across the kitchen table, William opened the journal to its first blank page and began to write, "To Eleanor, my heart, my home. This is our story." The morning after the diagnosis, Eleanor insisted on her usual routine. She dressed carefully in a pale yellow sweater and navy slacks, applied a touch of lipstick, and joined William for breakfast as if nothing had changed. But William noticed how her hands trembled slightly as she lifted her coffee cup, how her eyes darted occasionally to the calendar on the wall, as if reassuring herself of the date. "I'd like to go to the library today," she announced, her chin lifting with the quiet determination he'd always admired in her. "I don't want to just sit at home and think about this." William nodded, understanding her need for normalcy. "Of course, I'll drive you." Herder, the Millfield Public Library, had been Eleanor's sanctuary for decades. As head librarian for 35 years before her retirement, she had transformed the modest building into the heart of their community. Walking through the doors, William watched as Eleanor's shoulders relaxed, her steps becoming more confident as she greeted former colleagues and patrons. "Mrs. Harrison," exclaimed Marianne, the current head librarian who had once been Eleanor's assistant. "What a lovely surprise! We were just talking about the literacy program you started. It's expanded to 3 more schools this year." Eleanor beamed, momentarily herself again. "That's wonderful news. The children's reading program was always my favorite initiative." For nearly 2 hours, Eleanor moved through the library with purpose, running her fingers along familiar book spines, inhaling the comforting scent of paper and binding glue. William followed quietly, watching as she navigated the space that had been her domain for so long. It was only when a young librarian approached with a question about the rare books collection that the facade cracked. Eleanor stared blankly at the woman, panic flashing across her face. "I'm sorry," William intervened smoothly. "We're actually just about to leave for another appointment." Outside in the car, Eleanor burst into tears. "I couldn't remember where the rare books were kept," she whispered. "I organized that collection myself in 1983. William reached across the console and took her hand. "It's okay, Ellie." "It's not okay." Her voice broke. "It's not okay at all. This disease is going to take everything from me. My memories, my independence. Eventually, I won't even know who you are." The raw fear in her voice pierced William's heart. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "Whatever happens, whatever this disease takes, I will be right here. We'll face this together, just like we've faced everything else." Eleanor wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "You say that now, but you don't know how bad it will get. I've read about Alzheimer's, Will. I know what's coming." "Then we'll make the most of the time we have," William replied, an idea forming in his mind. "Starting today." That night, after Eleanor had gone to bed, William set to work on his secret project. At their dining room table, surrounded by photo albums, letters, and mementos collected over 5 decades, he opened the leather journal and began to write. On the first page, he carefully pasted a faded photograph. 2 young people on the campus of Hartford University, standing beneath an elm tree, their faces alight with the particular glow of new love. He wrote beneath it, in his neat, measured handwriting, September 28th, 1971, the day we were paired for Professor Harmon's American Literature Project. You wore a blue dress with white flowers and carried The Great Gatsby under your arm. When I asked your opinion on the symbolism of the green light, you launched into the most passionate literary analysis I'd ever heard. I fell in love with your mind first, then everything else followed. William worked until the early hours of the morning, carefully selecting photographs, transcribing stories, recording memories. The journal would be his gift to Eleanor, a tangible record of their life together that she could turn to when her own memories began to fail. The next day, Dr. Josephine Chen, the neurologist Eleanor had been referred to, confirmed the Alzheimer's diagnosis. Her office was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs, designed, William thought, to soften the blow of the devastating news she often delivered. Early-stage Alzheimer's presents us with an opportunity, Dr. Chen explained, her voice steady and compassionate. There are medications that can help manage symptoms and potentially slow progression, and with proper support and planning, Mrs. Harrison can maintain quality of life for quite some time. William listened intently, taking notes while Eleanor sat beside him, her posture rigid, her face a careful mask. "What's the timeline?" Eleanor asked suddenly, her voice surprisingly steady. "How long until I—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Dr. Chen leaned forward. "Alzheimer's progresses differently in each individual. Some people remain in the early stage for several years. With medication, cognitive exercises, proper nutrition, and physical activity, we can work to extend this period." "And then?" Eleanor pressed. Dr. Chen held her gaze. "Then we adjust our approach as needed. The important thing to remember is that you are not alone in this journey. We have support groups for both patients and caregivers, social workers who can help with practical matters, and a whole team dedicated to making this path as manageable as possible." As Dr. Chen outlined treatment options and next steps, William found himself studying his wife's profile, the determined set of her jaw, the subtle tremor in her clasped hands, the occasional flicker of fear in her eyes, quickly masked by resolve. Even facing this, she was magnificent. Later that afternoon, as they sat in their garden watching the October sun cast long shadows across Eleanor's beloved roses, she turned to him with unexpected clarity. "I want to tell James and Olivia together," she said, "in person, not over the phone." William nodded. "I'll call them tonight. And I want to make some decisions while I still can," she continued, her voice strengthening, "about my care, about our finances, about the end. Ellie." "No, Will." She placed her hand over his. "I need to do this. For both of us. I need to know that everything is in order, that you won't have to make impossible choices later." The fierce practicality that had always defined Eleanor was asserting itself, and William felt a surge of admiration, even as his heart ached. That weekend, Olivia drove up from Hartford, and James flew in from California. William watched as Eleanor welcomed their children, her face betraying nothing of the storm within. They shared a family dinner, Eleanor's pot roast, a recipe passed down from her mother, before gathering in the living room where so many family milestones had been celebrated. When Eleanor told them about the diagnosis, her voice was steady, her words carefully chosen. Olivia, with her medical background, asked practical questions about treatment options and care plans. James, always the more emotional of their children, struggled to maintain his composure. "How can we help?" Olivia asked finally, her professional demeanor cracking to reveal the worried daughter beneath. "By treating me like me," Eleanor replied firmly. "For as long as possible. I'm still your mother. I may forget things. I may change. But underneath it all, I'm still here." Later that night, after the children had gone to bed in their childhood rooms, William found Eleanor in their study, looking through old photo albums. "I want to remember everything I can, while I can," she explained, as he sat beside her. "I'm trying to burn it all into my mind." William hesitated, then decided it was time. "I have something for you," he said, retrieving the leather journal from its hiding place. "I've been working on this since the diagnosis." Eleanor's hands trembled as she accepted the journal, opening it to the first page with the university photo. Her fingers traced the image of their younger selves, then moved to William's handwritten account beneath. "Oh, Will," she whispered, turning the pages slowly. Each spread contained carefully selected photographs and mementos alongside William's detailed recollections. Their first date to see Fiddler on the Roof at the Hartford Theatre, their wedding day in June 1974, the purchase of their first home, the birth of Olivia, James taking his first steps, family vacations, quiet moments, and grand celebrations. "It's not finished," William explained. "I'm going to keep adding to it. Whenever you feel confused or afraid, whenever you can't remember something important, this will be here." Eleanor looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears. "You remembered everything." "Not everything," William admitted with a small smile. "Just the most important parts, and I'll keep remembering for both of us, for as long as it takes." Eleanor closed the journal carefully and held it against her heart. "Thank you," she whispered, "for this, and for not running away from what's coming. 52 years ago, I promised to stay for better or worse," William replied, taking her hand. "I meant it then, and I mean it now." That night, as Eleanor slept beside him, William lay awake thinking about the journal. There were still so many memories to record, so many stories to preserve. For the next 28 days, he would continue his mission, creating a tangible repository of their shared history that Eleanor could turn to as her own memories began to fade. The following weeks established a new rhythm to their lives. Morning medication with breakfast, appointments with Dr. Chen, cognitive exercises recommended by the memory specialist, careful adherence to routines and familiar surroundings to minimize confusion. And each night, after Eleanor went to bed, William's work on the journal. Some days were better than others. Eleanor would move through her day with nearly her old confidence, engaging in conversation, tending her garden, reading the books she had always loved. Other days, the confusion would descend like a fog, leaving her disoriented and frightened. One particularly difficult morning, Eleanor couldn't remember how to tie her shoes. William knelt before her and gently secured the laces, while she watched with tears of frustration streaming down her face. "I hate this," she whispered. "I hate what I'm becoming." William looked up at her, his heart breaking. "You are becoming nothing other than the woman I have always loved," he said firmly. "The woman I will always love, no matter what." That evening, after Eleanor had calmed, they sat together on their porch swing, watching the neighborhood children play in the November twilight. Eleanor's head rested against William's shoulder, their hands intertwined as they had been countless times over 5 decades. "Tell me a story," she said softly. "Something from when we were young." William thought for a moment. "Do you remember our first apartment? That tiny place on Maple Street with the leaky faucet and the radiator that clanged all night?" Eleanor smiled. "The one with the yellow kitchen and the window that looked out on the fire escape?" "That's the one," William confirmed, relieved at her recollection. "Remember how the super refused to fix anything?" "And you learned plumbing from library books," Eleanor continued, the memory surfacing. "You flooded the bathroom trying to fix the shower." William laughed. 3 inches of water before I found the main shutoff valve." "The downstairs neighbor was furious," Eleanor added, her eyes brightening with the memory. "She came up in her bathrobe, hair in curlers, threatening to call the landlord." "Until you offered her that apple pie you'd just baked," William finished. "She left with half the pie and never mentioned the flooding again." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the shared memory hanging between them like a gift. "I'm scared of forgetting these things," Eleanor admitted finally. "These small moments that made our life together." William squeezed her hand. "That's why I'm making the journal. So even if you forget, The memories will still exist. They'll still be ours. Soon that night, William added the story of the flooded apartment to the journal, including a photograph of them standing proudly in front of the building on move-in day, young and full of dreams, unaware of both the challenges and the joys that lay ahead. Beside the photo, he wrote, "Even when we had nothing, we had everything, because we had each other. That has never changed, and it never will." As November deepened toward Thanksgiving, the routine of Eleanor's medications, appointments, and cognitive exercises became the new framework of their days. William watched his wife navigate this altered landscape with a courage that both inspired and devastated him. Some mornings, she would wake clear-eyed and present, her wit sharp as ever. Other days, confusion claimed her before she even left their bed. On a particularly good morning, Eleanor suggested they visit the farmer's market, something they had done nearly every Saturday for decades. "Are you sure?" William asked, trying to mask his concern. Crowds had begun to overwhelm her recently. "I'm having a good day," she insisted, "and I want to use it well." The market was bustling with pre-Thanksgiving shoppers. Eleanor moved with surprising confidence among the familiar stalls, selecting apples and fresh cranberries, pausing to chat with vendors they'd known for years. William stayed close, ready to step in if needed, but allowing her this independence. At the Peterson family's vegetable stand, Martha Peterson greeted them warmly. "Eleanor! Will! So good to see you both. How have you been?" "Managing," Eleanor replied with a small smile, selecting carrots and potatoes. "Will tells me Thanksgiving is next week. I'm determined to cook as much of the meal as I can." William noticed the brief look of confusion that crossed Martha's face. Thanksgiving was indeed the following Thursday, a fact Eleanor had checked with him 3 times that morning. "Olivia and James will be here," William added smoothly. "Family tradition." "You're sweet children." Martha nodded. "How old are they now?" Eleanor's hand froze over the Brussels sprouts. William saw the familiar panic rising in her eyes, the struggle to recall basic information that should be immediately accessible. "Olivia just turned 40, William supplied, "and James is 37. Hard to believe, isn't it?" The moment passed, but as they walked away, Eleanor gripped William's arm with surprising strength. "Thank you," she whispered. "I couldn't remember. Their ages just disappeared." William covered her hand with his. "That's what I'm here for." By the time they returned home, Eleanor's energy was flagging. The good days often ended this way, her clarity burning brightly but briefly, like a candle consuming itself too quickly. "I think I'll rest before lunch," she said, her voice thin with fatigue. William helped her to their bedroom, easing her shoes off and drawing the curtains against the bright November sun. As she settled beneath the quilt her mother had made for their wedding, Eleanor caught William's hand. "Will you be here when I wake up?" she asked, vulnerability naked in her voice. The question gutted him, not just the fear of waking alone, but the implicit worry of whether she would recognize him when she woke. "I'll be right here," he promised. "I'm not going anywhere." While Eleanor slept, William retreated to his work on the memory journal. He'd been adding to it steadily for 17 days now, filling nearly half its pages with photographs and stories. Today, he focused on their children, creating spreads dedicated to Olivia and James, their births, childhoods, graduations, weddings, details a mother should never have to struggle to remember. When Eleanor woke 2 hours later, she seemed more herself, the rest having restored some of her clarity. She joined William in the kitchen where he was preparing lunch. "I was dreaming about the cabin," she said, accepting the cup of tea he offered. William smiled. "Lakeside?" They had vacationed at the same cabin on Lake Champlain every summer for 15 years while the children were growing up. Eleanor nodded. "I dreamed about the summer James fell out of the rowboat, and you jumped in to save him, even though the water was only 3 feet deep, and he could stand." William laughed at the memory. He was 7, and convinced he was going to be swept away by the current. "You were reading on the dock, and didn't even look up from your book. Just called out, 'The water's shallow, James. Just stand up." "But you dove in anyway," Eleanor continued, her eyes twinkling. "Fully clothed, wallet in your pocket, wristwatch and all. Some distresses need practical solutions," William replied, mimicking Eleanor's calm instruction to their son. "And others just need Dad to make a fool of himself to distract from the fear." Eleanor's laughter, genuine and unburdened, filled the kitchen. For a moment, the disease receded, and they were simply Will and Ellie, sharing a cherished memory. Later that afternoon, Dr. Chen called with Eleanor's latest test results. The medications were helping to manage symptoms, but the underlying progression continued. William took notes as the doctor explained adjustments to Eleanor's treatment plan, acutely aware of his wife watching him from across the room, trying to read his expression. When the call ended, Eleanor asked simply, "Bad news?" William sat beside her on the sofa. "Not bad, just the same. The medications are helping with symptoms, but the disease is following its expected course." Eleanor nodded, absorbing this. "How long until I'm not me anymore?" William took her hand. "You will always be you, Ellie. Always." "You know what I mean," she persisted. "How long until the person you've loved for 52 years disappears?" "Dr. Chen says everyone progresses differently," William answered carefully. "It could be years before the severe stage." "Or months," Eleanor added softly. William couldn't deny this possibility. Instead, he retrieved the memory journal from its place on the bookshelf. "Then we make the most of the time we have." They spent the rest of the afternoon with the journal, Eleanor occasionally adding her own recollections to William's written accounts. When they reached a page featuring their 25th anniversary trip to Italy, Eleanor's face lit up. "Venice!" she exclaimed. "The gondola ride where the gondolier sang, 'O Sole Mio,' so terribly off-key. We had to pretend to be coughing to hide our laughter." William grinned. "And that little restaurant where we got lost in the back alleys." "Trattoria del Sole," Eleanor supplied immediately, then looked surprised at her own recall. "I remembered that." "Of course you did," William said. "It was the best pasta either of us had ever eaten. Some memories are too perfect to lose." As Thanksgiving approached, Eleanor became determined to cook as much of the traditional meal as possible. "I've made this dinner for 40 years, she insisted, when William suggested they might simplify the menu. "I'm not going to stop now." William recognized her need to prove to herself, and perhaps to their children, that she was still capable. Instead of arguing, he offered a compromise. They would cook together, using her recipes, but sharing the work. The day before Thanksgiving, Olivia arrived from Hartford, bringing with her a forced cheerfulness that William recognized as her way of coping with her mother's condition. James flew in that evening, more subdued but equally determined to make the holiday as normal as possible. Together, the family prepared for the feast, Eleanor directing operations from her seat at the kitchen island, consulting the recipe cards she'd used for decades. William noticed how she kept checking and rechecking the instructions, sometimes reading the same step multiple times before proceeding. That night, after the children had gone to bed, William found Eleanor in the kitchen, staring at the turkey that sat thawing in the refrigerator. "Second thoughts about cooking tomorrow?" he asked gently. Eleanor shook her head. "I was just thinking about all the Thanksgivings we've had in this house, all the people who've sat at our table over the years. Some of them gone now." William moved to stand beside her. 47 Thanksgivings in this house, each one special. "And how many more will I remember?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely above a whisper. William had no answer. That wouldn't be a lie. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder as they both gazed at the refrigerator's contents, the ingredients for a meal that had marked the passage of their years together. "I've been thinking," Eleanor said finally, "about the journal you're making. It's for me, I know that. But it's for you too, isn't it? For after I'm not the same anymore." William tightened his embrace. "It's for us, Ellie. For the U.S. we've always been and will always be, regardless of what changes." Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. I want to add something to it. Something just from me. The next morning, Thanksgiving Day, dawned clear and cold. The Harrison home filled with the familiar sense of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie. Eleanor moved through her kitchen with the muscle memory of countless holiday meals, occasionally pausing when a step eluded her, but always finding her way back with William's gentle guidance. Olivia set the dining room table with her mother's best china and silver, while James built a fire in the living room hearth. The scene was so achingly normal that William found himself holding his breath, as if the slightest disruption might shatter the perfect tableau. The meal itself was a triumph. The turkey golden and succulent, the sides prepared exactly to Eleanor's exacting standards. As they gathered around the table, William watched his wife survey her handiwork with justified pride. "Before we eat," Eleanor said, her voice steady, "I'd like to say something." She looked around at the faces of her family, her husband of 52 years, her daughter with the compassionate healer's eyes, her son with his father's thoughtful gaze. "I know this Thanksgiving is different. We're all thinking about what's happening to me, even if we're trying to pretend everything is normal." "Mom," Olivia began, but Eleanor held up her hand. "Let me finish, dear. I need to say this." She took a deep breath. "I don't know how many more holidays I'll remember. I don't know how quickly this disease will progress, but right now, in this moment, I am here, fully present, with the three people I love most in this world. And I am thankful, so thankful, for every moment we've shared, and for whatever time we have left together." William reached for her hand across the table, his vision blurring with unshed tears. "I may forget your names," Eleanor continued, her voice wavering slightly. "I may forget who you are to me, but I promise you this. Somewhere inside, I will always know that I love you. That part of me cannot be erased." Oh, the meal that followed was subdued at first, the weight of Eleanor's words hanging in the air. But gradually, as the wine flowed and stories were shared, the familiar warmth of family togetherness asserted itself. Eleanor laughed at James's account of his latest academic misadventure, offered Olivia advice on her relationship with the doctor she'd recently begun dating, and gazed at William with eyes full of 5 decades of shared history. It was, despite everything, one of their best Thanksgivings. After dinner, as James and Olivia handled the cleanup, William found Eleanor in their bedroom, sitting at her vanity, staring at her reflection in the mirror. "What are you thinking?" he asked, sitting on the edge of their bed. "I'm trying to memorize my own face," she replied, her fingers tracing the contours of her cheeks, the lines around her eyes. "So I'll recognize myself as long as possible." William moved to stand behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "You are still the same beautiful woman I fell in love with all those years ago." Eleanor's gaze shifted to his reflection. "And when I look at you, I still see that shy boy from literature class, hiding behind horn-rimmed glasses and brilliant analysis of Fitzgerald." William laughed softly. "Those glasses were terrible." "They were adorable," Eleanor corrected, reaching up to touch his face. "Everything about you was adorable. Still is." That night, after the children had retired to their rooms, William and Eleanor sat together in the soft glow of the Christmas lights James had insisted on putting up early. "For festivity's sake," he'd claimed, though William suspected his son wanted to ensure his mother would see the decorations while she could still appreciate them. "I have something for you," Eleanor said, retrieving an envelope from the drawer of the side table. "I wrote it yesterday." William accepted the envelope, feeling its weight in his hands. "Don't read it now," Eleanor instructed. "It's for later, when things are harder. Put it in the back of the journal." William nodded, understanding. This was Eleanor's contribution to their story, words meant to reach across the ravages of her disease, a message from the woman she was now to the woman she would become, and to the man who would witness the transformation. Later, after Eleanor had fallen asleep, William sat at their dining room table with the memory journal open before him. He had been working on it for 24 days now, filling its pages with photographs and stories, creating a tangible record of their life together. He carefully placed Eleanor's sealed envelope in the back of the journal, respecting her wish that it remain unopened until the time was right. Then he turned to a fresh page and began to write about Thanksgiving. Perhaps their last with Eleanor, fully present, fully herself. He described her triumph in the kitchen, her poignant words at the table, the laughter they had shared despite the shadow hanging over them. Because that was the truth of their life together, William realized as he wrote. Joy and sorrow, gain and loss, had always been intertwined. Their story had never been perfect. It had been real. And real was infinitely more precious. December arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if the weather itself was offering a small mercy. Eleanor's good days became less frequent, the periods of clarity shorter, like islands of consciousness in an expanding sea of confusion. William watched helplessly as his wife struggled increasingly with everyday tasks, buttoning her cardigan, operating the coffee maker, finding the right words to express her thoughts. One morning, as William helped Eleanor dress, she looked at him with sudden awareness. I'm slipping away faster than we thought, aren't I? The directness of the question caught William off guard. These moments of lucidity had become precious, all the more poignant for their rarity. The medications help, he said gently. But yes, Dr. Chen says the progression is on the more rapid end of the spectrum. Eleanor nodded, absorbing this information with the quiet dignity that had always characterized her approach to life's challenges. Then we need to make some decisions, while I'm still able. That afternoon, they met with their attorney, updating their advance directives and ensuring all legal matters were in order. Eleanor was resolute, discussing end-of-life care and funeral arrangements with a practical clarity that broke William's heart. I don't want to be kept alive artificially when I no longer recognize any of you, she stated firmly, and I want to be cremated, with my ashes scattered in the rose garden. The attorney, a compassionate woman who had handled their legal matters for 20 years, took notes with professional detachment, though William noticed how her voice softened when addressing Eleanor directly. When they returned home, Eleanor seemed exhausted, the mental effort of the meeting having drained what energy she had. William helped her to the sofa, covering her with the afghan Olivia had crocheted years ago. Would you like some tea? He asked. Eleanor looked up at him, confusion clouding her eyes. Who are you? She asked, her voice small and frightened. William felt the floor shift beneath him. This had happened before. Brief moments of non-recognition that passed quickly. But something in Eleanor's expression told him this was different. It's me, Ellie. It's Will, he said gently, kneeling beside her. Eleanor stared at him, her eyes searching his face. Will, she repeated, as if testing the name on her tongue. My husband. Yes, William confirmed, relief washing through him. Your husband of 52 years. 52 years, Eleanor echoed, wonder in her voice. Then her eyes cleared, recognition returning. I'm sorry, Will. I knew you, but I couldn't find your name. It was like trying to catch smoke with my fingers. William took her hand, pressing it to his cheek. It's all right. I'm here. That evening, while Eleanor napped, William worked on the memory journal with renewed urgency. 28 days had passed since he'd begun the project, and the journal was nearly full. Tonight, he focused on the most recent chapter of their life together. Their retirement years, the travels they'd taken, the quiet pleasures of growing old side by side. He carefully pasted a photograph taken just 6 months earlier. Eleanor in her garden, sunlight glinting off her silver hair, her face turned toward the camera with a smile of pure contentment. Beneath it, he wrote, Spring, 2025. You said the roses had never bloomed so beautifully, and that each year in the garden taught you something new about patience and nurturing. Just like marriage, you told me, with that wise smile of yours. The longer you tend it, the more beautiful it becomes. William was so absorbed in his work that he didn't hear Eleanor enter the room until she spoke. "Is that me?" she asked, pointing to the photograph. William looked up, startled. "Yes, from last spring, in your garden." Eleanor studied the image, her head tilted slightly. "I look happy." "You were," William confirmed. "The roses had just bloomed." Eleanor sat beside him, examining the journal with curious eyes. "What is this book?" The question pierced William's heart. He had shown Eleanor the journal numerous times over the past month. They had looked through it together, adding memories, laughing over old photographs. And now she didn't recognize it. "It's our story," he explained, keeping his voice steady. "I've been writing down our memories." "Why?" Eleanor asked, genuine confusion in her eyes. "So we don't forget," William replied simply. Eleanor nodded, seemingly satisfied with this explanation. She turned the pages slowly, pausing occasionally at a photograph or passage that caught her attention. "We had a good life," she said finally. "Have," William corrected gently. "We have a good life." Eleanor looked at him, something indefinable passing through her eyes. "Yes," she agreed, "we have." The next morning, Eleanor couldn't remember how to brush her teeth. William guided her through the process, demonstrating each step as if teaching a child. She followed his instructions with frustrated concentration, clearly aware that this was something she should know how to do. "It's the simplest things," she said afterward, her voice tight with unshed tears. "The things I've done every day of my life." William wanted to offer reassurance, but hollow platitudes seemed worse than silence. Instead, he simply held her close, feeling the dampness of her tears against his shoulder. Later that day, Dr. Chen's office called with the results of Eleanor's latest brain scan. The disease was progressing more rapidly than initially projected. The medications were no longer effectively managing the symptoms. They would adjust the treatment plan, but expectations should be tempered. William thanked the nurse for the information, his voice mechanical, his mind already calculating what this meant. More rapid decline. Less time with the Eleanor he had known for more than 5 decades. He would need to accelerate his plans for the care she would eventually require. When he hung up the phone, he found Eleanor watching him from the doorway. "Bad news?" she asked, an echo of her former directness. William considered softening the truth, but dishonesty had never been part of their relationship. "The disease is progressing faster than Dr. Chen expected," he admitted. "They're adjusting your medications." Eleanor absorbed this information with remarkable composure. "How long do I have before I'm not me anymore?" The question hung in the air between them, impossible to answer with any certainty. "Dr. Chen says everyone progresses differently," William replied, the same answer he had given before, though they both knew now it was less time than they had hoped. Eleanor nodded, then crossed the room to the bookshelf where the memory journal was kept. She removed it carefully and brought it to William. "I want to look at this," she said, "while I still know what it means." They spent the afternoon on the sofa, the journal open between them, Eleanor asking questions about photographs she no longer recognized, William filling in the blanks with stories of their shared past. Sometimes a memory would surface, and Eleanor would finish a story William had begun, her eyes lighting up with the pleasure of recollection. Other times, she would listen with the polite interest of a stranger hearing about someone else's life. "Tell me how we met," she requested, as the winter sun began to set, casting long shadows across their living room. William turned to the beginning of the journal, to the photograph of 2 young people beneath an elm tree. "It was 1971, he began. "We were students at Hartford University. You were a freshman. I was a sophomore. We were paired for a literature project, The Great Gatsby." Eleanor supplied unexpectedly, a fragment of memory surfacing. William smiled, encouraged. "Yes, you carried your copy everywhere. It was dog-eared and filled with notes in the margins." "You wore glasses," Eleanor continued, her brow furrowed with the effort of recollection. "And a brown corduroy jacket with patches on the elbows. I thought it made me look intellectual," William admitted with a laugh. It made you look like you were playing dress-up in your professor's clothes, Eleanor countered, a flash of her old wit breaking through. They laughed together, and for a moment, the disease receded, leaving just Will and Ellie, as they had always been. That night, William added the day's events to the journal. Not just the difficult moments, but the laughter they had shared, the memories that had unexpectedly surfaced, the tender way Eleanor had placed her hand on his cheek before going to bed, and said, "I may not always remember your name, but I will always know your touch." As December progressed, Eleanor's decline became more pronounced. She began to wander the house at night, confused and disoriented. William installed additional locks and alarms, then took to sleeping in a chair beside their bed, alert to her slightest movement. Olivia visited more frequently, her medical training proving invaluable as Eleanor's care needs increased. James called daily, his voice on speakerphone bringing momentary recognition to Eleanor's increasingly vacant expression. "We should consider in-home care," Olivia suggested one evening, as she and William sat at the kitchen table, speaking in low voices, while Eleanor dozed in the living room. "Just a few hours a day, to start. You need rest, too, Dad." William shook his head. "Not yet. I can manage." Olivia reached across the table and took his hand. "You've lost weight. You're exhausted. Mom wouldn't want you to sacrifice your health." "She's still in there, Olivia," William insisted. "She has good moments. Yesterday she remembered the name of the street where we lived when you were born." "I know," Olivia said gently, "and those moments are precious, but the reality is her condition is deteriorating rapidly. You need support." William knew his daughter was right, but accepting help felt like a surrender, an admission that he couldn't fulfill his promise to care for Eleanor himself. "Just think about it," Olivia urged, "for Mom's sake, if not your own." The following day, as William was helping Eleanor dress, she looked at him with sudden clarity. "You're tired," she observed. William attempted a reassuring smile. "I'm fine." "No," Eleanor countered, a hint of her former firmness in her voice. "You're exhausted. I may be losing my mind, but I can still see that." She paused, struggling to organize her thoughts. "You need help. With me." The directness of her assessment left William momentarily speechless. "Olivia thinks so too," Eleanor continued. "I heard you talking. Last night. Or was it last night?" "Yes, it was last night," William confirmed, sitting beside her on the edge of the bed. "Listen to her," Eleanor said, gripping his hand with surprising strength. "She's a nurse, and she's our daughter. She wants what's best for both of us." William felt tears prick at his eyes. Even now, fading day by day, Eleanor was still trying to take care of him. "All right," he conceded. "We'll get some help." Eleanor nodded, satisfied. Then her expression changed, confusion replacing clarity. "Who are you talking about? Who's Olivia?" The moment of lucidity had passed, like a brief break in the clouds before the sky darkened again. William felt the familiar ache in his chest, the grief of losing her by increments. "Our daughter," he explained patiently. "She's coming to visit later today." Eleanor accepted this information without question, the momentary connection to her own words already forgotten. That evening, with Olivia's help, William arranged for a home health aide to come for 4 hours each day. The service would start after the new year, which was less than 2 weeks away. Until then, Olivia would stay with them through the holidays, providing the support William was finally ready to accept. As Christmas approached, William was determined to make it meaningful, aware that it might be the last Christmas Eleanor would recognize. He set up their artificial tree, smaller than in previous years, but adorned with the ornaments they had collected throughout their marriage. Eleanor watched from her armchair, occasionally reaching out to touch a bauble or ribbon as William placed it on the tree. "Pretty lights," she murmured, her vocabulary increasingly simplified. "Remember this one?" William asked, holding up a hand-painted ceramic star. "James made it in 2nd grade. You were so proud that you sent a photo of it to your parents." Eleanor took the ornament, turning it over in her hands. For a moment, William thought a memory had surfaced, but she simply smiled vaguely and handed it back. On Christmas Eve, Olivia prepared a simple dinner, while William helped Eleanor into a festive red sweater she had always worn for the holidays. James arrived in the afternoon, bringing presents and forced cheer that couldn't quite mask his shock at his mother's deterioration since Thanksgiving. They ate by candlelight, Christmas carols playing softly in the background. Eleanor barely touched her food, but she seemed content, watching the faces around her with a gentle smile, occasionally reaching out to touch William's hand, as if to anchor herself to him. After dinner, they gathered in the living room to exchange gifts. William had chosen items for Eleanor that would provide sensory comfort: a soft blanket, lavender-scented lotion, a stuffed animal that resembled a cat they had once owned. Eleanor accepted each present with childlike delight, the rituals of Christmas still familiar, even as their significance eluded her. When everyone else had opened their gifts, William brought out one final package for Eleanor. "I have something special for you," he said, placing the wrapped gift in her hands. Eleanor looked at it curiously, then back at William. With Olivia's gentle encouragement, she removed the wrapping paper to reveal a beautiful bound book, the completed memory journal, professionally duplicated and bound. "It's our story," William explained, opening the book to show her the photographs and handwritten accounts. "All of our memories, preserved forever." Eleanor ran her fingers over the pages, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "Our memories," she repeated softly. As William turned the pages, explaining each photograph and story, something remarkable happened. Eleanor began to nod, occasionally supplying a detail or name, fragments of memory surfacing as if the physical record before her was illuminating darkened corners of her mind. "That's Olivia," she said suddenly, pointing to a childhood photograph of their daughter. She broke her arm falling from the apple tree. Olivia gasped softly, tears filling her eyes. "Yes, Mom, that's right." For nearly an hour, the family sat together, turning the pages of the memory journal, Eleanor's recollections surfacing unpredictably but unmistakably. It wasn't a miracle. The disease hadn't been reversed or halted, but it was a gift, a temporary bridging of the widening gulf between Eleanor and her past. That night, after the children had gone to bed, William sat with Eleanor beside the Christmas tree, its colored lights casting a gentle glow over her face. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, her hand in his. "Happy," she said simply, finding the word that matched her feeling. William kissed the top of her head. "Yes, Ellie, I'm happy too." Outside, snow began to fall, soft flakes illuminated by the streetlights. Eleanor watched through the window, her expression peaceful. William knew that tomorrow might bring confusion and fear again, that the disease would continue its relentless advance. But in this moment, on this Christmas Eve, they were together, connected by the memories he had preserved and the love that transcended them. The final pages of the memory journal remained empty, waiting for the conclusion of their story. But William understood now that the ending had never been the point. It was the middle. All the thousands of days and nights they had shared, all the joys and sorrows, all the ordinary moments that, strung together, created an extraordinary life. And no disease could take that away. January arrived with a bitter cold snap that matched the new reality settling over the Harrison household. Eleanor's decline accelerated with heartbreaking speed, as if the brief reprieve of Christmas had been her mind's final rally before surrender. The home health aide, Martha, now came daily, her gentle competence a blessing as Eleanor's needs grew more complex. William watched his wife retreat further into the fog of her condition, her periods of recognition becoming rare treasures in days otherwise filled with confusion. On a particularly difficult morning, Eleanor refused to get out of bed, her eyes wide with fear as she stared at William. "I want to go home," she pleaded. "Please, take me home." "You are home, sweetheart," William replied, the familiar ache in his chest deepening. "This is our bedroom. We've slept here for 47 years. Eleanor shook her head. tears welling in her eyes. "No, I want my mother. Where's my mother?" William sat on the edge of the bed, taking her trembling hands in his. How to explain that her mother had been gone for 30 years, that the young woman Eleanor now believed herself to be had long ago grown into the grandmother of 4? "Your mother isn't here right now," he said finally, the gentle fiction kinder than the crushing truth. "But I'm here. I'll stay with you." The fear in Eleanor's eyes subsided slightly. She studied his face with the wary curiosity she now showed toward everyone. "Who are you?" she asked. "I'm Will," he answered, forcing his voice to remain steady. "I'm your husband." Eleanor considered this information, her brow furrowed. "Husband," she repeated, testing the word. Then, unexpectedly, she reached up to touch his cheek. "You have kind eyes." It wasn't recognition, not really. But it was connection, and William clung to it like a drowning man to driftwood. Later that day, after Martha had helped Eleanor bathe and dress, William found his wife sitting in her favorite armchair by the window, the memory journal open on her lap. She wasn't reading it. Her ability to process written language had deteriorated significantly, but she was turning the pages slowly, stopping occasionally to touch a photograph. William sat in the chair beside her. "Would you like me to tell you about the pictures?" he offered. Eleanor looked up, momentary confusion in her eyes before she nodded. "Yes, please." William began with the page she had open, a family beach vacation when the children were small. "This is Cape Cod, 1982, he explained. "You're building a sandcastle with Olivia and James. You told them the story of the 3 little pigs as you worked, changing it so the 3rd pig built a sand fortress that even the wolf couldn't blow down." Eleanor studied the photograph, a smile touching her lips. "Pretty," she said, pointing to the little girl with sand-covered hands. "That's Olivia, our daughter," William confirmed. "She was 7 then. She's a nurse now." Eleanor nodded, as if this made sense to her, though William knew the connection was lost. He continued turning pages, narrating their life together, watching for any flicker of recognition in Eleanor's eyes. Occasionally, she would comment on a photograph, happy or pretty or sad, her emotional responses still intact even as the context eluded her. When they reached a page with their wedding photograph, Eleanor paused, her fingers tracing the image of her younger self in white lace, looking up at a slender young man with earnest eyes and horn-rimmed glasses. "Pretty dress," she murmured. "It was your grandmother's," William explained. "You altered it yourself. Everyone said you were the most beautiful bride they'd ever seen." I couldn't believe my luck. Eleanor looked from the photograph to William's face, then back again. A slight furrow appeared between her brows, as if she was struggling to connect the young man in the image to the elderly man beside her. "That's you?" she asked, pointing to the groom. "Yes," William confirmed. "That's me. And that's you. June 15th, 1974. The happiest day of my life." Eleanor studied the photograph again, then reached out to touch William's face, her fingers cool against his cheek. "Still handsome," she said, the words clear and deliberate. William felt tears spring to his eyes. He covered her hand with his own, pressing it against his face. "Still beautiful," he whispered. As January deepened, Eleanor's physical health began to deteriorate alongside her cognitive function. She lost weight, her appetite diminishing despite William's best efforts to tempt her with favorite foods. Her sleep became increasingly disturbed, day and night reversing as she dozed through afternoons and wandered the house after midnight. Dr. Chen adjusted medications, prescribed nutritional supplements, and gently suggested it might be time to consider more comprehensive care options. William listened politely, but remained adamant. Eleanor would stay home with him as long as possible. It was what she had wanted, what they had discussed, while she could still express her wishes clearly. On a snowy afternoon in late January, William sat at the kitchen table with Olivia, who had driven up from Hartford despite the weather, concerned about both her parents. "Dad, I'm worried about you," she said. watching as he mechanically ate the sandwich she had prepared. "You've lost so much weight. You're not sleeping. This level of caregiving is unsustainable, even with Martha's help." William set down his sandwich. "Your mother took care of all of us for decades," he said quietly. "She raised you and James, supported my career, maintained our home, tended to her parents in their final years. Now, it's my turn to care for her." Olivia reached across the table and took his hand. "I understand that, Dad. But Mom wouldn't want you to destroy yourself in the process. You know that." William couldn't argue with this truth. Eleanor, the Eleanor who had been his partner for 52 years, would indeed be horrified at the toll her care was taking on him. She had always put his well-being above her own, had always been the practical one in their relationship. "Just a little longer," he pleaded. "The home health aid helps, and the respite care you arranged for 3 afternoons a week makes a difference. I'm not ready to let her go yet." Olivia squeezed his hand, understanding in her eyes. "Okay, Dad. But promise me you'll reconsider if your own health deteriorates further." William nodded, knowing his daughter was right. But privately, he had begun to suspect that his time with Eleanor might be shorter than any of them had anticipated. That evening, after Olivia had returned to Hartford, promising to come back the following weekend, William sat with Eleanor in the living room. She was having one of her increasingly rare good moments, her eyes clearer than they had been in days as she studied the flames dancing in the fireplace. "Pretty fire," she said, her voice stronger than it had been recently. "Yes, it is," William agreed, savoring this moment of connection, however simple. Eleanor turned to look at him, her gaze steady, in a way it hadn't been for weeks. "You're sad," she observed. The directness of the observation caught William off guard. "A little," he admitted. "Why?" she asked, the question so like the old Eleanor that it made his heart ache. William considered how to answer. "I miss you," he said finally, the honest simplicity of the words hanging in the air between them. Eleanor nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "I'm right here," she said, reaching out to touch his hand. "Yes, you are," William agreed, his throat tight with unshed tears. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the crackling of the fire. Then Eleanor spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I love you." 3 words. So simple. The same 3 words they had exchanged thousands of times over 5 decades together. But now, emerging from the fog of her disease, they held a weight that nearly broke William's heart. "I love you too, Ellie," he replied. "I always have. I always will." Eleanor smiled, then turned back to watch the fire, the moment of clarity passing as quietly as it had come. Later that night, after helping Eleanor to bed, William worked on the final pages of the original memory journal. Though he had given Eleanor the bound copy for Christmas, he continued to add to the original, documenting these last chapters of their journey together. Tonight, he wrote about her moment of clarity by the fire, preserving it alongside all the other precious memories they had created together. As January gave way to February, Eleanor's decline continued. She now rarely spoke in complete sentences, her once eloquent voice reduced to single words and simple phrases. She no longer recognized Olivia or James when they visited, though she seemed to find comfort in their presence. Only William could still occasionally pierce the fog. A familiar touch or voice, sometimes bringing a flicker of recognition to her increasingly vacant eyes. On Valentine's Day, William arranged a special dinner, setting the dining room table with their best china and crystal, placing a single red rose in the silver bud vase that had been a wedding gift. Martha helped Eleanor dress in a soft blue sweater that brought out the color of her eyes, arranging her silver hair with the care Eleanor herself had once taken with her appearance. "She looks beautiful," Martha said, as she prepared to leave for the evening. "You both enjoy your dinner now." William thanked her, then led Eleanor to the dining room, seating her at the table illuminated by candlelight. He had prepared a simple meal of her favorite foods: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, glazed carrots. Eleanor looked at the plate before her with mild interest, but made no move to eat. "Happy Valentine's Day, Ellie," William said, raising his glass of sparkling cider in a toast. They had both stopped drinking wine years ago when it began to interfere with their medications. Eleanor looked at him blankly. "It's a special day," William explained. "A day to celebrate love." Eleanor's gaze drifted around the room before settling on the rose in its silver vase. She reached out to touch the velvety petals. "Pretty," she murmured. "Like you," William replied, his heart heavy with the knowledge that she had no understanding of the significance of the day, of the 52 Valentine's Days they had celebrated together before this one. After dinner, William helped Eleanor to their bedroom, assisting her with her nightly routine. The careful removal of her clothing, the donning of her nightgown, the washing of her face, the brushing of her teeth. Tasks she had once performed independently now required his gentle guidance. As he helped her into bed, Eleanor caught his hand, looking up at him with sudden intensity. "Stay," she said clearly. "I'm not going anywhere," William assured her, sitting on the edge of the bed. Eleanor shook her head, tugging at his hand. "Stay," she repeated, patting the space beside her. Understanding dawned. William nodded, quickly changing into his pajamas and slipping beneath the covers beside her. Eleanor immediately curled against him, her head finding its familiar place on his shoulder, her hand coming to rest over his heart, the same position they had slept in for decades. William felt tears prick at his eyes. In this most basic physical way, her body remembered what her mind had forgotten. The comfort of his presence, the security of his embrace. "I'm here, Ellie," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I'll always be here." Eleanor sighed contentedly, her eyes drifting closed. Within minutes, her breathing deepened as she fell into a peaceful sleep. William lay awake, holding her, memorizing the weight of her against him, the scent of her hair, the sound of her breathing. He knew, with a certainty that transcended medical prognoses, that their time together was growing short. Eleanor was slipping away, not just mentally, but physically, her body becoming as fragile as her mind. The next morning, Eleanor couldn't get out of bed. Her breathing was labored, her skin pale, her eyes unfocused. William called Dr. Chen, who came to the house immediately, her expression grave as she examined Eleanor. "Her body is shutting down," Dr. Chen explained gently. "The disease has progressed to affect her physical functions. I can arrange for hospice care." "No," William interrupted. "No strangers. Just tell me what to do to keep her comfortable." Dr. Chen nodded, understanding. She prescribed medications for pain and anxiety, explained what to expect in the coming days, and promised to return the following morning. Before leaving, she placed her hand on William's shoulder. "Call me any time, day or night," she said, "and call your children. It's time for them to come home." Olivia arrived within hours, her medical training temporarily set aside, as she assumed the role of daughter keeping vigil. James caught the first flight from California, arriving late that night, his face haggard with grief and jet lag. Together, the family gathered around Eleanor's bed, maintaining a quiet presence as she drifted in and out of consciousness. William sat closest, holding her hand, speaking to her softly, reading aloud from the memory journal as if the stories might somehow reach her, might light her way through the gathering darkness. On the third day of their vigil, Eleanor opened her eyes during a rare moment of wakefulness. Her gaze moved slowly from James to Olivia, recognition absent, but a vague sense of familiarity perhaps present. Then her eyes found William, and something changed in her expression. "Will," she said clearly, the name emerging from weeks of fragmented speech like a perfect note from a damaged instrument. William leaned closer, his heart pounding. "I'm here, Ellie." Eleanor's fingers tightened around his with surprising strength. "The journal," she whispered. "Back page." William looked at Olivia, who immediately retrieved the memory journal from the nightstand. He turned to the back page, where Eleanor's sealed envelope had remained untouched since she had given it to him months earlier. "Open it," Eleanor urged, her voice fading, but her eyes suddenly clear. With trembling fingers, William opened the envelope, removing a single sheet of paper covered in Eleanor's elegant handwriting, now recognizing the letter she had written the day before Thanksgiving. "Read it," she whispered. "To me." William cleared his throat, blinking back tears as he began to read. "My dearest Will, if you're reading this, it means I'm still here but no longer entirely present. The disease has taken more of me, and I wanted to leave these words behind while I could still express what is in my heart. 52 years ago, I made the best decision of my life when I agreed to work on that literature project with the shy boy in the ridiculous corduroy jacket. Every day since then has been a gift, even the difficult ones, because they were days spent with you. As I write this, I'm afraid of losing myself, afraid of becoming a burden, afraid of leaving you alone, but I'm also filled with a lifetime of gratitude for the love we've shared, the family we've created, the memories we've built together. When I can no longer remember our story, remember it for me. When I can no longer recognize your beloved face, know that somewhere inside, I still love you. When I can no longer find the words to tell you what you've meant to me, remember these. You have been the great love of my life, William Harrison. Through all the changes, all the challenges, all the joys and sorrows, you have been my constant, my compass, my home. I have never regretted a single day of our journey together. And when the time comes for me to leave this life, know that my last thoughts will be of you, even if I can't express them. Know that the love we've shared doesn't end with this disease or even with death. It continues in our children, in the lives we've touched, and in your heart, which has always been intertwined with mine. Forever yours, Eleanor. William's voice broke on the final words, tears streaming unchecked down his face. He looked up to find Eleanor watching him, a single tear tracing a path down her pale cheek. "I remember," she whispered, the words barely audible. "I remember everything." William leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. "Ellie," he breathed, her name a prayer on his lips. "Thank you," she murmured, "for remembering for me, for loving me through this." "Always," William promised. "Always, Ellie." Eleanor's eyes held his, clear and present in a way they hadn't been for months. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said softly. "You gave me back our story." William held her gaze, seeing in her eyes the young woman he had fallen in love with, the partner who had walked beside him for 52 years, the complete soul of the woman he adored. In this moment of impossible clarity, the disease fell away, leaving only Eleanor, his Eleanor, fully present for these precious final moments. "I love you, Will," she said, her voice suddenly stronger. "I've always loved you." "I love you too, Ellie," William replied, his voice breaking. "More than words can say." Eleanor smiled, a real smile, filled with recognition and love. Then she closed her eyes, her breathing becoming shallow but peaceful. William kept vigil through the night, holding her hand, whispering their story into her ear, their first meeting, their wedding day, the birth of their children, the quiet moments and grand adventures that had filled their life together. Olivia and James remained nearby, supporting their father as he supported their mother on her final journey. As dawn broke, painting the bedroom with soft golden light, Eleanor drew a final, peaceful breath and was gone. In the days that followed, William moved through the necessary rituals of death, as if in a dream. The funeral arrangements, the memorial service, the condolence calls. Olivia and James stayed close, their grief for their mother balanced by concern for their father. "Will you be all right here alone?" Olivia asked the evening before she was due to return to Hartford. William looked around the home he had shared with Eleanor for 47 years. "I won't be alone," he said quietly. "She's everywhere here." A month after Eleanor's passing, on a bright March morning when the first crocuses were pushing through the soil in her garden, William sat at their dining room table with the memory journal open before him. He had been adding to it still, recording the beautiful clarity of Eleanor's final moments, the peaceful way she had left this life, the celebration of her life that had brought together so many people whose lives she had touched. Now, he turned to the final blank page, ready to complete their story. As he did, something fell from between the pages. A second envelope he hadn't noticed before, with his name written in Eleanor's handwriting. With trembling fingers, he opened it to find another letter, dated the same day as the first. "My beloved Will," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I've left this world, and you are facing life without me." William read the letter through tears, hearing Eleanor's voice in every word as she released him from sorrow, encouraged him to find joy again, and reminded him that their love transcended even death. When he finished reading, William placed the letter carefully back in its envelope. Then he turned to the final page of the journal and began to write. "The truest thing I ever knew was loving you, Eleanor Harrison. Our story doesn't end here. It continues in every life we touched, in our children and grandchildren, in the garden you planted, in the books you loved, in the countless lives you enriched with your kindness and wisdom. You feared being forgotten, but that was never possible. You are woven into the fabric of my soul, into the heart of our family, into the memory of our community. The disease may have taken your memories, but it could never take the essence of who you were, the love you gave so generously, the light you brought into this world. In those final moments, when you returned to me with such clarity, you gave me the greatest gift, the knowledge that somewhere, beneath the ravages of disease, you were always there, always my Ellie, always loving me as I loved you. They say the greatest love stories never end. Ours never will. I will carry you with me for the rest of my days, and when my time comes to join you, our story will continue. Two souls forever intertwined, forever in love. Until then, I will tend your roses, cherish our memories, and live each day with the same courage and grace you showed me. I will remember for both of us. I will love for both of us, and in that love, you will always be present. Forever yours, Will." William closed the journal, running his hand over its leather cover. Then he rose and walked to the garden where the first signs of spring were emerging from the winter-hardened ground. He knelt beside Eleanor's beloved roses, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face, the rich soil beneath his fingers. And in that moment, in the garden she had tended for decades, in the home they had shared for nearly half a century, William felt Eleanor's presence, not as a ghost or apparition, but as the enduring love that had defined their life together, a love that Alzheimer's had tested, but never conquered, a love that even death could not diminish. The memory journal rested on the bench nearby, their story complete, but never truly ending. For as long as someone remembered, as long as love remained, Eleanor lived on, in William's heart, in their children's faces, in the pages of their shared history, and in the countless lives she had touched with her quiet grace and abiding kindness. And that, William realized as he tenderly pruned a rose bush preparing for its spring awakening, was the greatest victory of all, not over disease or death, but the triumph of love that transcends both, that remains when all else is lost, that continues beyond memory, beyond life itself. In the garden Eleanor had loved, surrounded by the life they had built together, William smiled through his tears, feeling her presence in the gentle spring breeze, hearing her voice in the rustle of emerging leaves, finding her love in the awakening roses, reaching for the light. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.